Hi, I'm Annie, and I'm on the staff at NAMI, Delaware. Today, we have a great conversation planned. We're talking about higher education mental health resources with Sarah Stowens. Before we invite Sarah in, I'd like to take a moment and just tell you about our agency. If you're viewing this video from outside the state of Delaware, first of all, you probably want to know what NAMI stands for and what NAMI Delaware is. So, NAMI is National Alliance on Mental Illness, and there is a NAMI in every state. NAMI, as a national agency, is the largest grassroots mental health organization in the country. It's been in operation for more than 40 years, and it was founded by a couple of moms who each had grown children living with serious and persistent mental illness. And they were looking to network and help each other navigate the labyrinth of mental health supports and services. So, NAMI Delaware was founded just a few years later, and our agency operates independently, serving Delawareans. We work to offer support, education, advocacy. We have a helpline. We also have a housing program. So, our agency offers a wealth of resources to Delawareans affected by mental health conditions. Now, when I say affected, I mean not only those who are diagnosed with mental illness, but those who love them, those who care about them, and those community members who want to understand how to help them. So you can learn more about NAMI Delaware at our website, namidelaware.org. And we're offering a few virtual programs that I'd like to make you aware of. We have a support group meeting tonight for family. So family and loved ones who care about someone who lives with a mental illness. That group is called Family Support Group, and it's meeting tonight. You can register online. We also have another family support group meeting later in the month of August. That's August 24th. For peers, and when we say peers, we mean individuals who identify as living with a mental illness, we have a peer support group called Connection, and that is meeting August 20th. We have a book club. We have a new offering from NAMI Delaware. It will be virtual at first, and the first book is Don't Call Me Crazy, 33 Voices to Start the Conversation About Mental Health. And our first book club meeting will be August 18th. You can learn all about these offerings and more at our website, and check out the virtual programs tab. So before we start our conversation around higher education mental health resources, I do want to remind you of the fact that you're not in this alone. If we talk about things that might be troubling or upsetting to you, we want you to know you're not alone. You can get resources and information and support quickly. In fact, you can even text. There is a crisis text line available to you at 741 741. And that is a national resource. And then also the Delaware Hope Line is available by phone and by text. And that is another way to receive crisis resources immediately. So, if you're tuning in live and you'd like to ask us questions or you'd like to say hello, please do that. We will hop over and look at those comments as regularly as we can. And I think it's time to introduce and to welcome our guest, Sarah Stowens. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. You look great. Are you ready?
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So you are an adjunct professor of sociology from Wilmington University, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So we're talking today about higher education mental health resources. And I think it's probably good to start with what NAMI already talks about with regard to this. One of the things that we stress when we do awareness is to talk about the prevalence of mental illness, so just how common it is. And research shows it affects about 1 in 5, if not more, each year. And we also know that more than half of those affected don't seek treatment in that year. But here's the thing: 75% of those who are affected by mental illness started feeling their symptoms by the age of 24. And that's right there in the college age, the typical college age, right?
Yeah.
So you as a college professor, do those statistics surprise you at all?
No, I teach now and have worked in student affairs, which is the programmatic leadership, helping services side of universities as well. And something that you notice when you're with college students all the time, traditionally aged college students, residential campuses, there is just a lot of stress. And it's coming from anywhere on a given college day,
Right.
And there is, to be clear, not a typical college experience, I think, at this point.
True.
We are in the middle of virtual and remote and quarantining, but even prior to this,
Right.
we are seeing huge numbers of non-traditionally aged college students enroll. We're seeing people come back for different sets. We're seeing all manner of living arrangements on campus, off campus, roommates, not roommates, families, that sort of thing. But maybe the common denominator that we see across our students, or I have seen across students, which got me interested in this in the first place, was that there is this kind of stress and anxiety that I noticed. But that was maybe as far as I got.
Right.
Just kind of, I could tell that my students needed some support, but didn't know then what.
Right. 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 So, as like you just mentioned, there are so many different college experiences, different higher education facilities that offer different modes of learning and also different levels of support for the professionals in that doing that work, right? So I know, we're looking for resources because you and I have talked about this before. And I know that with the work that we've done with NAMI Delaware, we've talked to various higher education professionals in different agencies in different schools who are all saying the same thing. What can we do? Where can we go? How do we help our students? And like you said, it's just that common denominator of stress, but how do we help? So I'm guessing you were looking for resources. Yeah. So maybe a pocket guide?
Maybe a pocket guide.
How about a pocket guide? You want to tell us about the pocket guide?
Yeah. So I am currently pursuing my EDD at Wilmington University, where I teach in higher education leadership. And one of the really amazing opportunities that the program affords to its students is an opportunity to really dive deep into a different area of higher education. And they guide you through the process of determining how you're going to, what you're going to do for this class. But it's essentially an independent study. And you are encouraged to choose an area, office, process that you need or want more information about in higher education. And so everything from strategic planning to knowing what the daily functions of a vice president of academic affairs to mental health resources. And so I worked with my advisor on this project, and really my initial framework was, I know enough to be dangerous, but this realm, that's terrible. So what do I do if a student says to me, because I don't think this situation ever has been with students, right? They never walk up to me and say, I'm depressed.
Right. Here's the situation.
Right. They never approach me with a diagnosis. They say, I need an extension on my paper because I've got these 5 things going on and I'm just running out of time.
Right.
And so I can address the extension on the paper, but I also want to address all the other things they just said to me.
Right.
I want to do it with a background. I want to be able to know the steps, at least have some background knowledge. I want to ground my practice in theory and research. So I set about doing just that, being a social researcher, which is what I am good at. And I interviewed students and I interviewed school psychologists and I interviewed faculty and I talked to you and got a number of resources and went out and found a lot of scholarly work and found more resources and just dove deep. And I tried to put together as comprehensive a resource as possible, understanding that there was no real way that I was going to be able to get everything in.
Right.
Also, like, full disclaimer on the website, right? Like, this is not a complete guide and it's not meant to be the end all be all, but it is meant to give us a jumping off point.
Right.
To give us a place where we can go to ground our practice in theory and research.
Love it. Love it. Spoken like a true higher education professional and researcher. That's great. So I think the best way to continue our conversation is really just to unpack the website. So we've gathered a few screenshots, and I'd like to start with the one part of your page that's called the problem.
Yeah.
You really clearly state, using campus statistics, what we've got going on here. Do you want to talk about any of this or any of the parts of this that you want to highlight?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was try to find data because I really did want this to be to be proven, right? I wanted people who weren't sure or didn't know to make sure that I was being, I was proving that this is something that we needed to focus on.
Right.
And I found this study from the National College Health Assessment, and they have this huge number of respondents. And when you go down this list of statistics, you really see what it is that I was seeing in my classroom, but also what I think sometimes we see when we're orientation professionals or residence education professionals or athletic professionals. We see students, maybe not necessarily always the buzzwords, right? Like, we don't necessarily, a student's not going to walk up to us and say, man, I feel hopeless.
Right.
But the way that they talk to us, it really can lead us to these conclusions, right? We know that our college students are feeling overwhelmed. And this survey bears us out, right? 87.4% of students feel overwhelmed by what they have to do.
And that's pre-pandemic.
Yeah, and that's pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you go down this list, feeling exhausted, feeling lonely, feeling anxiety. But then I got to some lower numbers and I thought, I was looking at the numbers, feeling good about myself. Like, yes.
Right. Yes, we're getting it down.
13. And then I read what the 13% was. And I thought, that's 1 in 10.
Right. That's not okay.
I have students in my class right now. I think man, this is a problem we have to focus on. We have to know, as college professionals, as higher ed professionals, what to be looking for, how to modify our practice, perhaps, how to use our language appropriately, how to do some work ourselves, and where to go for further help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you lay it out so well, just by posing this as, look at the facts. And I dare you to say there's not a problem, really. I mean, you don't say it that way, but that's really pretty clear. Now, I do want to say, too, that when we were sharing our Facebook Live promotion on our social media, we were saying, if you're connected to a college, this conversation would be good for you. So if you're sitting looking at this video and you aren't a higher education professional, but you are a parent, or you yourself fit into the category of a higher education student, this is still relevant. Yeah. This still matters, even if you are connected in the community that way. And I live right on in the college campus of University of Delaware. I live right on Main Street. And I need to know this. If I didn't know it professionally, I would need to know it as a member of the community. So I'm so grateful that you've put all this together. So let's move on. Now, you know how strongly I feel about the next topic I want to talk about, key terms. Now, that might be because I used to be an English teacher, but I also think it's because it's so important. So at NAMI Delaware, we're always trying to have these conversations, and they're uncomfortable and they're hard. And the more we do it, the better we get. But it's how we have them that is so critical. The words we use or don't use that open doors for people and give them safe places to go with this tough situation. So, can we look at the key terms? Or actually, I don't think I have a screenshot for that, but I think I just wanted to ask you about it. I was so excited about it, I forgot to make a screenshot. But tell me what you were thinking when you put that part together.
So, one of the things that I think is really important is that at any college or university, there are so many of us that connect to students in different ways all day long.
Right.
And so with key terms, what I really wanted to do was make sure that at a foundational level, we were kind of all working with the same language, the same kind of basic understanding. So the key terms kind of does two things, right? It helped me understand the difference, for example, between anxiety and depression, right? Like, as someone who isn't a mental health professional and doesn't work in this realm all the time, I wanted to make sure that I was aware enough of different diagnoses. But I also wanted to make sure that we weren't using terms, quite frankly, from out of laziness, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I know that there are, in fact, in my cohort, there are a number of professionals in my higher ed leadership cohort who work in support services and work in all manner of different offices, interfacing with students in all different ways, right? I'm in the classroom, we have financial services, we have admissions, we have, student leadership folks. So We're all working with students in different ways, but no matter who's working with a student, if someone flippantly says like, oh, that's crazy, to a student who feels any of the feelings that are listed or not, or a loved one feels, or a friend or a significant other, I didn't totally understand how hurtful it could be.
Yeah.
I think I knew not to use the words, but I didn't necessarily maybe understand. And I think doing a little reading and doing a little, it really it makes you understand why.
Yeah.
It's so important to be thoughtful about the words that we're using.
Being thoughtful is huge.
Yeah. Use the words that you mean. I say, that's crazy. I don't mean that's crazy. I mean, that's so hard right now.
Right. When people describe the weather as crazy, no. Weather is windy. The weather is rainy. The weather is cold. The weather is erratic. But it is not that word. That is, like you said earlier, it's a lazy word. It's a crutch word.
Yeah.
I am so glad and grateful that you really address that in such a comprehensive way on the page. Yeah. Thank you. From a language arts teacher and from NAMI Delaware, thank you. All right, now I do know that we have a screenshot for the next one, and that's the page, the section on stigma. Yeah. So stigma is such a critical piece to this conversation. And full disclosure, I wasn't even really familiar 10 years ago when my own family experienced a critical mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. I knew what the word meant probably, but it never occurred to me that could be what's keeping my family from getting help. And that's exactly what was happening. So thank you for making this a page. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think
thank you, Wesley. We have Wesley helping us on the back end, and we are so grateful. It's awesome.
I mean, I don't know how he learned how to do all this.
So Wesley is just really sharp.
So when it comes to stigma, what I think the most important thing that I took out of my research was bringing up the conversation in ways that felt possible, meaningful, appropriate. So things that I have chosen to do to address stigma, right? Make it so that students know that this is a conversation that we can have, is as simple as putting a mental health statement on my syllabus, right?
Yes.
Making sure that my students see, right? It's a passive experience, right? They read it, they know. I don't have to say anything to them, but they know that I'm available if they need help, or if they just want to talk, or if they need to know what to do next, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm available as a first point of contact.
Yeah.
And so there are small and large things that we can do as college professionals, in our various roles to address stigma. But really what I learned in doing this research is that making sure that the conversation is happening, right? Making sure that we're talking about mental health, the difference between mental health and mental illness, and making sure that we're aware as higher ed professionals that part of our job is to talk about it.
Yeah.
Is to make sure, is to elevate the conversation.
Right. I think I didn't mean to cut you off, but as a former educator myself, never in the higher education realm, but still being a teacher, it's easy to fall under the umbrella of, well, I just teach English. I don't teach mental health.
Right.
I just teach math. I just teach whatever. No, you teach students.
Right.
And the students are whole and complete beings, and their mental health is part of who they are, right?
Yeah.
And overcoming that through a very, like you said, a very gentle way of mentioning it in a syllabus, that's easy. And it's so encouraging to hear you say this and to encourage other professionals to do it.
Yeah.
I know it would have meant the world to me if I had seen that on a syllabus from any of my professors.
Yeah.
So thank you for addressing that. And also you mentioned the difference between mental health and mental illness. Huge. Another language thing, but I appreciate it. Another language thing, but really people throw around the term mental health when they really are referring to a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And that can be stigmatizing in itself.
Yeah.
So we need to use the words we mean, and we need to, like you say, do the work to understand how to help our students. So
Yeah.
this is just wonderful. I'm just thrilled that you're sharing this with us. All right, so let's move on. We can't unpack all the sections of this website, but I do want to show the page that has all those tabs so people can see. And I think it's important. So we have this page list that shows the problem and stigma, best practices, do the work, resources, and annotated bibliography. And every good researcher should be showing that. And so thank you. So when you're saying best practices, what is that section really covering?
So when I talk about best practices, I move further into higher ed framework, and really start to combine the higher ed world with mental health resources.
Okay.
So I talk about equity. I talk about immediate actions. I talk about like institutional buy-in, essentially, and kind of go from there, right? So it's the funnel. I use the funnel a lot in teaching analogies because it seems to work for everything.
Oh, it works great. It's a good visual.
So institutional buy-in is at the top of the funnel, and our syllabus statements are kind of at the bottom of the funnel, but it's sort of an entire, that best practices tab is kind of soup to nuts. So
good. And that's a great place to start for those of you who are beginning this fall semester, perhaps remotely, differently than you might typically do, just to kind of get an overview of these suggestions and see where you fall just innately without having done the work that you've done, Sarah. So let's talk about do the work, because I love that section too. Yeah. What did you have in mind in that section? Do the work. That is like the action step one, right? The take action step.
Yeah, I think so. I talked to a number of folks in preparing to do research. I wanted to do a series of interviews, and I talked to one college psychologist in particular who said this phrase to me, actually. We were having a conversation talking about referring students as soon as they started crying. The psychologist said, as soon as people see a student crying, they just say, go to the counseling center right away. But I don't understand why they would do that. You can do some work yourself. And she wasn't talking to me, she was just kind of commenting on the experience. But I was so struck by that phrase, because I think that I think we all have good intentions, and we all want to be as supportive of college students as possible, of students as possible, right? But we also, we are mindful of everything else that we hear and all of the other noise that we hear. And we're mindful of liability, and we're mindful of
there it is. The liability is a big piece.
We're mindful of all.
Yeah, sure.
And it's good to be mindful of all of that. And I address liability and legal issues on the website.
You do.
In the best practices page. But also, if a student is crying,
right,
the first question to ask is, what's going on?
Right.
As opposed to, oh my gosh, let's go to the counselor.
I'm going to panic because you seem to be emoting. Right.
And in the same way that a student wouldn't walk up to me and say, I'm feeling depressed. Can you,
right.
Professionals are not as cut and dried as this either, right? But when there is an off-ramp, sometimes we take it. And
I love the way you said that. That's such a great visual too.
That is meant as a negative. It isn't meant as big. It's just that sometimes we take the off-ramp. But we could stay on, right? And keep going with our students. And so do the work yourself is really meant to identify points of contact with our students when we don't need to take the off-ramp, because here's a great way to have a conversation, right? It isn't meant to say like we should be crisis counselors, because we shouldn't be.
Right.
And there are crisis resources on the webpage as well. But it is meant to say, we can have this conversation and we can ask some questions. But mostly, what I heard time and time again from the students I interviewed, what I heard time and time again from the college psychologists I interviewed, and what I read in much of the research is that in simply listening to a student, we are doing half of the work already.
Yeah.
Because they're just looking for someone to emote to.
Right.
And
safely. Yeah.
I'm happy to do that. So that's kind of what the point of it was.
I love it. It really ties together well a lot of the work that we do at NAMI. NAMI Delaware, it depends on the NAMI because not every NAMI does this, but we offer a course called Mental Health First Aid.
Yeah.
And it's also offered for adults who work with young people, and that's called Youth Mental Health First Aid. And there's even a teen mental health first aid. And the whole concept of these courses, and these are offered by the National Council on Behavioral Health, but what you're saying is exactly what the training includes. And so I think it's important for, along with the resources you're providing on your website, for those who are tuning in right now and thinking, yes, I agree with all this stuff, but I'm a little leery. I'm not sure I can be as comfortable as Sarah is saying. There are trainings you can actually go through, and it's a one-day training. It's not, like you said, you're not becoming a crisis counselor. You're becoming a mental health first aider. And it's very much like the concept of if you learn first aid, do you become a doctor? No. No. If you know first aid, you are not going to be offering like a surgery to somebody. No, in fact, I don't recommend that at all.
Liability issues.
Yeah, they're back to the liability. Exactly. But mental health first aid is really giving you the tools. And one of the big ones, like you just said, is about listening.
Yeah.
It's empathy. And it's also not telling them what they should do. It's listening and asking questions. And you actually illustrated that so beautifully in your kind of scenario of someone coming up to you and asking you a question. You're going to ask, what's going on?
Yeah.
And those kind of open-ended, safe questions asked by people who are trusted, that's what anybody needs, but especially people who are in these critical points in their lives where it's extra stressful.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about young adults, we know about brain development now. We know more around that, and the fact that you're in your mid 20s before your brain is completely developed,
Yeah.
which explains a lot about my teenage sons. So they're not teenagers anymore, but that totally explains the last 10 years. But so I think all of this is so important. And those of you who are tuning in right now, if you have any questions, please jump in. But I'm just so grateful that you've done the work
Yeah.
so that other higher education professionals can take what you've put together and start conversations in their realms, wherever that is,
Yeah.
whether it be virtual, whether it be in person. And all of the statistics you shared were pre-pandemic, and I think that's an important aspect of this too, because it's going to be even harder this year.
Yeah.
We have to be ready, and we can do it.
We sure
So
can.
yeah, we sure can. Well, Sarah, I am so glad you were a part of this conversation and you were willing to do this with me. Do you have anything else you want to share or offer as a last thought?
No, I just, I hope that folks find the website helpful. Um, and yeah,
Yeah. Well,
I
I
got
want to thank you again. And mental health first aid. I
it.
think yeah. And I think that's a great partnership. All right. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. And until next time, bye bye.
Bye.